Welcome to the Self-Publishing Roundtable. This is part 2 of our Pearl Harbor and More World War II stories. And today and right now, you might have seen our earlier podcast, which had RV, Marion, and Robin in it. We were missing one of the authors, and she is here right now to talk to us. This is Alexa Kang. Alexa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here.
We're excited to have you as well. Should we jump straight into it? We'll ask you the same questions that we asked the other three, and we'll be interested to see how you answer them.
Sure.
So first off, we started by asking, how accurate do you feel your story is in terms of the historic time period?
I actually take historical details very seriously. When I started writing books for publication, and actually even before, when I was just writing for fun, because I have a small group of followers, even before I decided to self-publish, and I just never felt I can just make things up, and I'm pretty meticulous when it comes to historical details. And my short story, Christmas Eve in the City of Dreams, I wanted to give readers the feel of New York was like, not just New York today. And I grew up in New York. Part of my childhood I spent in New York, so I'm familiar with the city, and also now and how it's all changed. But 1940 New York, I wanted to give the readers that experience of what it's like to live there. And one of the places I mentioned was Cass's Deli. And that deli really did exist in 1940, and they had been there for even before that. Originally, I was looking at 2nd Avenue Deli because that's the one that everybody knows is closed down now. To all of New Yorkers distressed, it closed down some years ago. But when I looked into the history, 2nd Avenue Deli didn't exist at the time. But Cass's Deli existed, and the founders' sons were actually were drafted to go to war in World War II at the time. And they started this whole campaign to send sausages to the soldiers. And they got everybody involved because food was scared and there were lots of rations. And so mentioning Cass's Deli, it was a really passing mention in my story, but even something like that to me makes the story that much more significant. And in my current series, which is a big story that I just finished releasing, it was sprinkled with a lot of little details like that and incorporating the bigger picture. And I think that the readers might not realize how much work had gone into putting these little details into the story, but I think altogether, whether they know it or not, it gives them a full feeling of being in that era. So.
And if y'all ever have a chance to go to Katz's Delicatessen, their pastrami with a little bit of brown mustard.
Oh, you've been there.
Yes. Oh, yes. I came to this country when I was about 12, and we lived in Cleveland, Ohio. We're big on corned beef, pastrami, that sort of thing. I did have that while I was in New York many years later, and oh my goodness, yes, it's so good. Just yes, and yes, if you have a chance to. And so when I read that, I was like, I know where this guy is. And also the Russian tea room and the red awning, right?
Yes.
Because that's still a very big deal. And it is the little things. And if you're familiar with it, it just brings back all the memories and all the feelings and emotions along with it, and just invest that in the story. And I think that's another reason why I enjoyed the story, because it's those little things that brought all that emotional investment into the story. That, and I love a good grifter tale.
Oh, great. Thank you.
That
red awning was interesting because I think writing 20th century historical fiction, we get a chance to go into YouTube and try to find old footage and pictures, and we have Google images now, and that helps a lot to help authenticate whether what we're writing is true and not just something that we think we know but may not be true at the time.
Right. But we have to ask, is there a time where you think that you should, or it may better serve the story if you sacrifice accuracy, or is it that these moments, these little pieces should be there no matter what the plot calls for?
I think there are ways to get around things when I need to divert somewhat. I work with 2 different editors for each of my stories. For this one, I only worked with my development editor. But I bounce ideas with my team before I decide to go way off. And sometimes you have to take some liberty, but I always want to make sure that even when I do, it's not so far-fetched that someone would say, this could impossible, this could not happen. Errors do slip in. Readers, if they pick it up, they get upset. But it's just so hard to get everything right because we don't know. We have to even be aware that, oh, that might not be the case back then. But we have to know that before we would check it. And sometimes we just don't think of it. It just didn't occur to us. And those errors might slip in. But otherwise, when we divert from the truth, if I deliberately do it, I try to make it so that, okay, I have to take this liberty. And how do I do it in a way that's authentic, that it could have happened, even if in reality that didn't happen. Now, in the short story, that wasn't the case. I think everything I wrote were pretty much on. It was short. It was a short story. There wasn't much I had to deviate from. But in Rose of Anzio, which I actually wrote this big epic tale, there were 2 times when I did. One was my main character, Tessa. She was pretty young. She was 16 when she decided to become a nurse, and that in reality in the U.S. by then, nursing had become a pretty incorporated professional program because of Florence Nightingale. And I said, well, okay, she's so young, she couldn't have been in nursing school. But the reality was people didn't have birth certificates the way we do now today, when everyone's checking everyone's ID wherever you go. There were lots of soldiers who joined the army when if they were big, if a guy looks like he's big, people wonder, why aren't you in the army? They're like, I'm 15. But the 15-year-olds actually felt lots of pressure to join because they're walking around at home and people are looking at them really upset. Why are you not in the army? And it was so sad. And they would just go ahead, get fake documents and go and join the army just so they don't feel that they're ashamed of who they are. And so I had my character go and find these fake documents, and so she faked her way through. So it was bending the truth, but in an authentic way that could have happened.
Right. Oh, and this, as I read in the author's notes, is a side character to your main epic. Do I have that correct?
Oh no, so he is a main character, but he comes in book 2.
Aye.
He's in book 2 to 4, and he's very important, and my readers love him. And when I had to keep working really hard at the main male character that started in book 1, just so Jesse, who's in Christmas Eve in the City of Dreams, it doesn't take away from my main character. And I had to make sure that they're both equally attractive. And still, he's so popular with the ladies, and I mean my readers. They email me. I get fans asking, so is Jesse going to get together with Tessa? Oh, what's going to happen to him? Oh, I have a crush on him. I'm getting all these emails about his character. They're like, oh, Anthony's great, but I really like Jesse. And that was the case even before I gone into turning this into a huge publishable book. And I really enjoyed this chance to flesh out his background a bit, because he came in book 2. By the time we meet him, he's already in the army and he's already in Italy. And I had some flashback scenes to give him the background, but I think this short story really gave me a chance to give readers some more, and it gives my readers something more to read after they finish my series, because they just want to grab more of him.
Right. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I am a big fan of World War II, and I've read deeply and widely on the subject on all the theaters and everything, and there is a lot of content out there, whether it's movies, video games, TV shows, documentaries, an entire channel. They call it the History Channel. It's actually World War II channel, but I digress. What is it about the subject matter? What is it about the time frame that interests you when there is such a wealth of information and fiction on it? And how do you think your fiction in particular stands out in this great sea of World War II fiction?
Well, you know, I actually give a lot of credit to my fellow authors. They will more serious stories. They had written more serious stories, even in their body of work and in this anthology. I compare myself and I think I write popcorn entertainment. Mine's a love story. I mean, it has a lot of historical backgrounds to it and heavy work. But how I got into it was I wanted to write an epic. I just love love stories. Romance, but not necessarily romance, but real love stories. And I don't really categorize all my books and stories as romance because they don't always have happy endings. But I like love stories that it has a really big, huge, epic background. So World War II provided that background. But to answer your question, well, how did I pick the topic? When I decided to write this story, the Jesse's in, I looked at the landscape of historical fiction in the World War II era, and Normandy's been done so many times, and I thought, I'm a new author. There's nothing I think I can bring to that at this point that hasn't been done and done better. But what I discovered was that the Italian campaign hadn't been written about all that much, and especially not in fiction. You have to go into academic reading to find information about it, and not everybody wants to pick up this very heavy book with a lot of facts and like
right.
It's interesting to me, probably to you, but a random person who's just being introduced to this subject, that's not the first thing they'll look at. But they might pick up my book and say, oh, that's interesting, I didn't even know they fought in Italy. And Anzio was a huge screw up for the Allies, and it was so sad, and they were stuck there for so long. It was miserable. And today is a footnote footnote in history unless you know about it. And so I think through my story I was able to give readers a new facet, a new dimension to look into. Not all the stories took place in in Northern Europe, or I mean, we know about the Pacific as well, but this is actually the people who fought in this battle deserve to be remembered, and this is their story. So I try to look for something, at least at this point, I'm trying to look at covering parts that hadn't been written about that much. Surprisingly, even with this huge body of work out there, there's still many parts of this history that hasn't been covered, or it's been forgotten. And I think my story being a sort of more entertaining love story makes it, a little different from everybody going to serious issues of genocide and, Nazism and all that very, very serious, heavy stuff.
Right. You do need different levels of entertainment and engagement when approaching this. Not everything has to be Bill Curtis somberly telling about how many people died and all the takes. Sometimes it can be a love story. It can be light, even though everything else around it is dark. That said, there are a lot of different stories in this anthology. Just great variety, and there is not a stinker in the bunch. Other than your own, who's stood out to you? I'm not going to ask who's the favorite. They kind of freaked out when I said which one is your favorite, but which one stands out to you?
I really like Diane Ashcroft's story with the Irishman and the American contractor who was in this small Irish town. And I don't have a title of her story in front of me right now, but
Allies After All?
Allies After All. And I thought that that story moved me in a way that it showed two different people from different countries, and they had some preconceived notions about each other. And now they're stuck together. They had to be together and work together. And I think that even today in our society, and also with everything that's going on in the world, it's still happening today. There are lots of misunderstanding based on cultures and misconceptions about each other. And how do we overcome that? And I think her message was so positive that in the end, we have to find that we all on the same side. We're all humans. We're all people. Mm-hmm. And we fought this big war. And I think my writing about World War II taught me a lot of things too, was that we've been through all this. And I tell, people get so upset today about every little thing. I said, look, we've been through wars. You don't believe it, just go on YouTube. Just see how those bombs landed in the middle of cities. We have lots of things happening today that are really horrible. But think about London being bombarded day after day after day. And that was what people lived through. We can get through what we're facing today. We just have to stop running into all these conflicts and disagreeing with each other, but actually find our common grounds.
Right. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to some historical fiction, mm-hmm. How do you market that? I'm a science fiction fantasy girl, and I find that to be it's very specific. You do market in a certain way according to subgenres. Is it the same with historical fiction? Do you have to kind of make sure only those folks in the subgenre or see it, or can you present it to the wider audience and get crossover?
It depends on the tale. It has been difficult. I think I've done pretty well. Marianne Kumro, who you interviewed earlier, she's been doing pretty well too. We have to work extra hard. I'll give you an example. I just ran a 5-day KU free promo back in early November with this to make this big splash because my series ended and it totally screwed up my also bots. I mean, it just completely, it is a mess, and it's going to take me probably months to recover from that. And I was doing better. I was selling better before that. I think with historical fiction, right now there's several things going on, which is we starting the band together on keyboard on the Writers Cafe. Rin Shell, she started hosting this site, and every month we're doing historical fiction cross promo, and she's doing this just to help other historical fiction writers. I've started doing that too. I ran an Insta freebie promo last month for historical fiction writers as well, and that everybody just loved it. I decided to do one because I couldn't find one to join. There were so many going on. There were lots of PNs and fantasies, and I was like, I can't get into them. And people have invited me to join. I was like, I can't. And I even joined up with Ross. What's her last name? Was it Wet Ones is Romance? And it didn't really do a whole lot for me. I've done Evie Brown's. Again, there's not that much crossover, and my story is not even the hardcore historical fiction in that sense. So I think right now the historical fiction authors are getting together and trying to help each other. I particularly now use Amazon ads. The sponsored ads have been working very well for me because now I can look for specific keywords and get myself into spaces where Amazon would market my book for me to the right reader. So that's been super helpful. And I think with Marianne, that was what she's been doing as well. And that's been helping us get to our readers. I've been running some things too. I'm cross-promoting authors who write in World War II era in our Facebook club. You should join it. You should come in and check us out. And it's not a promo group. I mean, we tell our members when we have a new release, but there are lots of picture sharing, story sharing, memory sharing. We make it a point not to turn this into a marketing group, but it's more a group where readers can come in and discover us if they want. But we can also have a chat group of people to talk to when we think of these, when we think about this era. I've been hosting some things too. We have so we'll be doing something with Pearl Harbor, a smaller one. 20th century historical fiction is where I'm getting at, and I think I might do more on my own just to help other authors and help myself. Yeah.
It sounds fantastic. Can you give us, do you happen to have the link to the Facebook page?
Yes, it's a bunch of numbers, but I will send you something. Yeah,
All right.
this is long. There's like a Facebook slash group slash and a bunch of numbers, but I will email it to all of you.
Thank you, because there's a bunch of historical fiction writers, established and getting in, who want to talk to other historical fiction writers and exchange information. And with that in mind, what kind of advice would you give someone interested in writing historical fiction who hasn't done it before? What is most important?
I think that they have to learn about this era, whatever era they're working on. You should at least start to do research into it as you write your story. I didn't read a whole lot of stuff before I started writing. I actually learned the details as I wrote my story. I did research when something comes up, and I think for me that worked, because as writers, we like to procrastinate sometimes, and if we have an excuse why we are not writing, and it's so much easier to read, and you can get stuck on that. You could be preparing forever. You don't want to be doing that. But at the same time, well, how do you manage both? I don't have enough time. That's everybody's problem. We don't have enough time. But when I wrote my story, for example, the very first line of Rose of Anzio was, my character drove up in a convertible into the driveway to his home. I was like, well, what kind of cars did they drive? What color car did they drive? So that was how I did my research. So when the issue comes up, I'll look into it. And that is how you could find the facts to support your story, and you're learning at the same time, and you didn't stop writing because you're learning the facts as you go through the story. I think that might be a good way to get into it, and without being an excuse for why you're not writing. I think that at least speaking for writers who want to write historicals in the more contemporary era in the 20th century and possibly in the 19th century, YouTube is amazing. I couldn't believe how much stuff is on there. There is no excuse to say, oh, I couldn't find information on this and that. You know what? When I wrote, for example, the red awning in the Russian tea room, I actually didn't know if that was red or not. Or did they have it in 1940? And so I was able to find pictures. I was able to look things up. What did the Empire State Building look like back then? They didn't have those railings to guard people from jumping. They could just walk up and to the top and just look. I mean, it was a more innocent time. People didn't think these sinister things, and but there was this one footage of New York City in 1943, and it was just a camera filming the exits and the entrance of a subway station for 20 minutes. And I just could watch that, and that's how people dressed, and they're not that different from us, but they people just going about their day-to-day lives. They just look like they're from a different time. And so you could get authenticity. You could even get the sound, the feel, the only thing you're missing is the smell.
Right.
So,
and we're not missing that. Let me tell you, folks, you're really not missing anything.
Yeah.
So is this the only series you have written? The Enzo and Jesse? Is that the only one you have, or do you have others?
This is the story I published this year, and this is my debut series. I'm working on a spin-off of Rose of Anzio of another minor character. This one will be really fun. It's a time travel story, and so I'm taking one of the characters in book 4 that had very little screen time into 1989.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's gonna be pretty funny.
Okay, let's start from the beginning. Tell us about both this series and the one you've already published, because we'll give you dedicated time to talk about what you're writing.
Okay. Rose of Anzio it's a saga. It's a story that starts off with 2 relatively young characters. A girl in London was being sent from was being sent to America to live with some distant relatives right before the London Blitz, and she ends up in Chicago, where her mother's estranged family lives, and this is a pretty prominent family. And the girl's name is Tessa, and there she's going to learn. She's going to meet her the main male character, Anthony, who is the son of the family that she's living with. In the beginning of the story, there's a lot about Chicago, and I never knew Chicago has such a deep, rich history. And now, after having done all the research, I understand why when people talk about Chicago politics or Chicago pet problems, and I understand now where all that came from. It wasn't just something we're facing today. There are lots of problems that they have even now that went back to historical roots. And it was at the same time, it's such a fascinating place. Illinois was the hotbed of isolationism, and it was actually the place where the momentum against America going into war it really gathered strength. And that was the Midwest. It was actually where a lot of conflicts come from, again, as opposed to the more the East Coast people who wanted to intervene in the war, particularly Roosevelt. And so I incorporated that part into the story, in Anthony's storyline. And as far as Tessa went, she was discovering Chicago. Now with her plot started with discovering the South Side, because she's living with this prominent family in the Shishi neighborhood up in Evanston. But the interesting part of the story actually took place in the South Side. It was that is where the meatpacking district was.
Right. Yeah.
That's where the lots of the neighborhoods were very segregated, and lots of tensions. So I was able to bring that part into the story through her storyline. And so for a love story, we didn't start off really getting into anything romantic. And she was pretty young. She was 14. He was 18. He's in college. So, but I was able to bring in that historical background. So, book one, I think, gave people that flavor. But it was a very sweet and innocent time for my characters. But they're going to get drawn into this horrible, horrible international world tragedy, and he does end up going to war, of course. It's sort of a spoiler, but not much, because this is what the story is about, and there are 4 books to it. She falls in love with him. She follows him. She finds a way to follow him as a nurse. And once we move to Italy, and that's where Jesse comes in, and so Anthony, through Anthony, I was able to tell the story of what happened to all the soldiers and all the atrocities they had to go through. Jesse it brings in a lot of spirit. A lot of my lovers, my readers fell in love with him. And I think because they love him so much, they're going to feel the emotions more through him, not just the war and all that, but here's a character you really, really want to root for. But he's going to make you feel the emotions of what happens when someone you love goes to war. And I think that's something that historical nonfiction can't bring to you. You could read facts, and you could read even recounts, and you feel how bad everything was. But you have to fall in love with somebody in a story, in a fiction story, to really feel how much it hurts and how terrible war could be. And so I think I was able to cover that in Rose of Anzio, and hopefully that's what moved my readers and anyone who discovered my books. And even this next story is the same theme, is that how much do we lose by being in war? Even today, I donate the first 2 months of my proceeds of each of the Rose of Anzio books to the Chicago Veterans. It's a nonprofit group, and they help. We integrate veterans who return back into civilian life, and it's very hard for them. They don't get enough support from the government. They don't get lots of them have PTSD, mild or serious at different levels, and they wait for more than a year to even get to a time when the government would say okay, you can go see someone now. And I've seen again when they said, it's not even the money. Yes, the money helps. But I just like somebody to acknowledge that I have this condition, and nobody is out there acknowledging it. And so I know how hard it is for people who have to live through it. And from what I've read and from the veterans I've talked to and people who consulted with me on my story. And so this is the same theme on my spin-off as well. It's not a series. I'm going to have a bunch of little stories spinning off from different characters, not the main characters in Rose of Anzio, but this one, again, is a theme that in 1989, he goes into this new world. He travels into this world, but the female main character is a girl from 1989, and I can relate to it. I think even today, young people millennials, whoever can relate to it. We're in a different world. What is World War II?
Right.
We obsessed with our own day-to-day issues. Who's winning American Idol? I don't know.
Right.
What's Kim Kardashian wearing? Is Kanye in the hospital again? So now, what happens when this person that comes into her life, and now she's being exposed to something that she never thought of? So we're going to see again, I think this theme of how much loss we take when we send people to war, and when we get ourselves into war. So
I had asked, thank you. I had asked the ladies before, had they gone to any of the World War II museums, the one in New Orleans, or any of those locations? Have you, or any of the locations that you speak about in your books?
Oh, I actually went to Anzio. I just came back from this huge trip. A World War II tour. I visited Sicily on top of that too, but
of course, you really have
I got the beach vacation, but I did I did do a World War II tour. It was tailored, and I can send you information about my tour guide as well. She's fantastic. Yes. She has on Facebook. She shares a lot of stories about her the tourists who join her on her private tour sometimes and group tour sometimes. And I went to every place that I had written about in Rose of Anzio. So I did visit the American Memorial Cemetery. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. She said everyone's up in Normandy, and that place is so crowded, and no one comes down here. It's gorgeous, and it was so thoughtful the way everything was laid out. She got us a special pass onto the beach, where the 3rd Division, which is where the division I follow in my story, the 3rd Infantry, U.S. Army 3rd Infantry Division, where they landed, is now locked. It's not open to public because the Italian military uses it for training. So she got us a special pass into there. So I took a lot of pictures, and I took some videos as well, and they're all on my Facebook author page. And I tell people ask me, oh, is it copyrighted? Can we show it? I said, no, it's not. I didn't take these for profit purposes or commercial purposes. I want people to see these. So yes, share them with people, especially any children and grandchildren of veterans. They might want to see this. I took pictures of spots where I think my characters might have been. So yes, I have a lot of that to share.
Oh my goodness. Now I'm really excited. You're going to have to share that with us as well. Okay. And one other thing, one last question. What would be the one thing you would want people, especially those who are much younger than us, to remember about World War II?
Oh, wow. That's a pretty big question.
Yeah, it is.
What were they? I think today, starting my generation and forward, we are so worried about what rights we should have. And that's important, of course. And I think that society has progressed to a point where there are a lot more social justice. There are lots of ugly things about World War II, even with the good guys, even with the Allies. But I think we don't remember about sacrifices. I think today is so hard for people to give up a little bit of anything It's all, oh, I deserve this and I should have this, and I'm in, and not so much entitlement, but oh well, everybody should be sensitive and should be, we walking on eggshells trying to make sure everybody has the rights, but nobody talks about sacrifices. Sometimes you have to give up something, and yes, not everything is the way you want it. I mean, we don't even like it when we get just verbally offended today. And yes, that is there's a whole issue of what should be or should not. But you think about the kids in World War II, they're 18-year-old, 19-year-olds. They're just being plucked from nowhere. I mean, even colleges weren't that common back then. People stayed home in their little towns. I mean, today at least we go to college or we go somewhere. We in Europe we backpack. We go places, and if we choose to, we don't. Not all of them do, but we can. But back then people didn't travel so easily, and now they're being taken from everything they know and being thrown into some world they don't know, and they're being shot at. Bombs are coming down at them, and they willingly went, and they still thought, yes, I had to do this because for the right reasons, or for my fellow soldiers. And if they're bigger minds, then maybe for something bigger good. But people talk more about sacrifices back then, and today we don't do that. And there should be a balance. And I think young people need. I would hope that they could read, if they read World War II stories, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, to get that takeaway that it's not just about you. It's not just about me, but sometimes it's about all of us. And I hope people remember that.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. Because you don't think about sacrifice. You think about your rights.
Right. And that's important. I mean, in the past, there are lots of ugliness. I see some of the old flyers about the Japanese, and I mean, today you just couldn't believe that people would have said these things and draw. I mean, we've come really far, even in less than 100 years. And one of the things that I didn't touch on, and I don't feel qualified to touch on in writing about Chicago, was the racial segregation and tensions involving the Black community. And I did bring in the racial. I thought that was worth addressing, but it was too deep. It was too much for a more innocent love story, and I couldn't work it in a way that I felt I could do it justice. But I had there's a couple of side characters. There's a secondary character, Jack, also very likable, who's Tessa's friend, and he's Irish, and the Irish community has a very strong hold on Chicago politics and the government, and he felt he was in love with a girl from a Mexican girl from the Mexican neighborhood. So I brought in that aspect of Chicago in 1940 and all the problems that went with it, in a way that I felt that I can actually give the attention to this problem, but not slight it or disrespect it in any way. And I wish there were more stories about that out there, because these are the things that it's important that of course that the ways that we talk about today, the progresses we talk about today is important, but I think that somewhere along the line people have forgotten that sometimes it's okay to give, and sometimes you have to give.
All right. Thank you so very much for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you all. I'm so sorry for the time mess up.
No, it's fine. It worked out in the end. We're very pleased with that. Was there anything that you wanted to ask, Erica? Because I burnt up a lot of the time.
No. We will, I guess, end with where can people find you on the internet, Alexa?
Oh, I'm everywhere. I have my website. It's www.alexakang.com. Just my name. It's pretty easy. I'm on Facebook, and I'm sort of active in the World War II Facebook group. It's the Second World War Club. I don't want to hog up space. As an author, I don't want to be too intrusive, and so we like to let the readers talk and readers to participate. And I'm on Twitter. I'm still trying to figure out how to best utilize that resource. I think there might be ways, but I'm not. I'm busy. I'm on Twitter as well, and I think that might be what my next project is, to actually go into Pinterest and start posting our books on Pinterest, where people can find us there, because we have really beautiful, interesting book covers, and I think that's a good way for people who just want to casually browse and read and see World War II pictures. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you for waking up early and speaking with us. Also, thank you to Christian for coming back during her workday and doing another interview.
Thank you.
It's fun. I love doing this.
And just a reminder that the Self-Publishing Roundtable will be closing, and our last episode will be on the 15th of December at the usual time. I think that's it. Find us at
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
We've
no.
decided it's time to end, but from the ashes of SPRT, 3 more podcasts will arise, and we'll provide much more information on that on the 15th of December episode. So catch us there. And Christian, do you have anything to say to the listeners?
Sure, if I can get some light here. Good night, Internet.
Night.
Night.